Stephen Timms, tell me about your upbringing.
Well, I was born in Oldham, which was near where my mother grew up in Saddleworth in the Pennines. When I was very young, we moved to South Wales, which was where my father grew up. He was an engineer, mum was a teacher. When I was 7 or 8, we moved to Hampshire. And so most of my upbringing was in Fleet, in Hampshire, where my mother still lives. And, it was a comfortable, tranquil childhood on the whole. My father had a period out of work when I was in my early teens, so that was a bit of a challenge for the family. But otherwise, it was a very happy upbringing.
Your Christianity is a big part of your life. Tell me, when did you discover your faith?
Well, that happened when I was a teenager. We started, my brother and I, my younger brother, I'm the oldest of 3, my younger brother and I both attended something at school organised by the local group of an organisation now called Urban Saints. It was called Crusaders at the time, and they dumped that name a few years ago very sensibly. But it was a youngsters group. He started attending, and so I thought, well, I'd better go too then. And we did socials and sport and camps and a weekly Bible class on a Sunday morning. And over a period, I decided I wanted to be a Christian, as he did too, actually, my brother.
And what part does your faith play in your life today?
Well, it's always since then been the starting point for my thinking about life and politics. And when I went to university, I was involved in the university Christian group, and it was decided one summer that we would go and help out on a church mission in Forest Gate in East London. And that's why I first went to East London. We were there for a fortnight, had a great time, I really enjoyed it. And decided then when I left university and got a job in a computer company in London, I'd go and live there. I joined the church, which by then this mission group had set up. My wife now was also a member of that group. And on arriving in East London, I joined the Labour Party. And so the fact that my becoming politically active and what I was doing because of my faith was so intertwined, I think. I've always, for me, what I believe has always been the starting point of my politics too.
Have your faith and your socialism, I don't know if you'd use that word.
Yeah, I would.
Have they ever fought against each other?
Not really. I mean, sometimes I'm aware that different perspectives arise from each about the same thing, but I think that's helpful rather than unhelpful. I mean, people often say you shouldn't mix up religion and politics, and if you do, you're asking for trouble, and they point to trouble somewhere in the world, and sure enough, you can see they've got a point. But actually, I think they're drawing the wrong conclusion. I think the truth is that religious faith is a very good starting point for politics because it's the source of exactly the values that we need to make politics work. Responsibility, solidarity, compassion, patience, persistence, truthfulness, all these things that you need if politics is going to be able to do its job properly. And I think a shortage of some of those values is one of the reasons that politics has had such a hard time lately. And I'd like to see more people coming at politics from a starting point of committed religious faith, because I think that would help us win back people's trust that politics can do the job that it's supposed to.
Which is more sectarian, religion or politics?
Well, they've certainly both got challenges in that area, but they are, religious faith. We've seen it in the pandemic that, as far as I can tell, almost every council in the country has had to turn to churches or sometimes mosques, as in my area, to get food to people who otherwise would not have had it because of lockdown. It's curious that after a long period when we've kind of thought that religion was on the way out, its centrality in the lives of lots and lots of communities, certainly mine, but communities all over the country, has really been renewed pretty dramatically, I think, over the last 2 years of the pandemic.
I love talking to all of my interviewees, but Because of what happened in May 2010, there was a chance that I wouldn't be talking to you because you survived an attempted murder.
I did.
Can you describe what happened that day?
Yes, it was the first surgery after the general election in 2010. And a young woman had made an appointment to come and talk to me. She said she had an employment issue she wanted to discuss. And she came to the surgery. I think she was the second person I saw that afternoon. And I thought she was coming to shake my hand. She sort of came around the table with her hand out. I thought she was, but actually that wasn't what she was coming to do. She had a knife and she stabbed me. She stabbed me 3 times. And to begin with, I wasn't sure she'd succeeded. I worked out what she was trying to do. I just felt as though I'd been punched. I wasn't sure she'd managed to get the knife in. So somebody came and restrained her, thankfully. I went to the gents' toilet just behind and I lifted up my jumper and saw there was quite a lot of blood. So that's how I knew that she had indeed succeeded.
What happens then? Somebody's called the ambulance
Yeah,
at this time.
The ambulance came. I was taken to the London hospital. According to the surgeon, I had suffered a life-threatening but not imminently life-threatening injury. So they were able to patch me up and I was okay. She subsequently told the police that she had 2 knives with her, a large one and a small one, and at the last minute she decided she couldn't hide the large one up her sleeve, so she was using the small one, which is probably the reason why I'm still here.
Have you had any physical complications as a result of the injuries that you sustained that day?
Not that I know of, no. I had, let's say, 3 stab wounds, suffered a stomach injury, which they were able to patch up. I don't think there are lasting physical ill effects, as far as I know.
Do you have flashbacks?
I don't, no. I mean, it's a curious, obviously it was a horrible experience. Looking back on it, it wasn't a hugely traumatic experience. I think partly because it didn't hurt all that much. That was the strange thing. As I say, it felt as though I'd been punched. I wasn't in agony. And I think perhaps for that reason, I don't have flashbacks or, fears about what happened.
How long before you felt able to have a constituency surgery after that?
Well, that was the beginning of May. I think the next surgery I did was the end of June. So it was a couple of months. And I did feel pretty anxious going back for the first time, but nothing remotely comparable has happened since. And actually, one of the kind of strongest memories for me of that period was the huge wave of support from my constituents, which I kind of hadn't experienced before, including she did it, she told the police, because she was unhappy that I'd voted in favour of military action in Iraq. Right. She was a Muslim, she'd been radicalised, but I had lots and lots of Muslim constituents contacting me saying, we're praying for you for a speedy recovery. And in a way, I think it strengthened my relationship with my Muslim constituents as a result.
She's serving life in prison.
Yes, with a minimum term of 15 years, which will expire in 2025.
Do you think about that? Her release?
I do a little bit, partly because I've recently had 3 letters from her, which the police have given to me. I wasn't aware of their existence until the police gave all 3 of them. They were written over a period, I think. And in the 3rd of them, she says she's sorry about what happened. So we're in a restorative justice process at the moment, which may lead to me meeting her at some point before she's released from prison. And I'd welcome that if that opportunity does arise, but we'll have to see whether it does or not.
Lots of people think they wouldn't want to meet that person. I think it takes strength to say that you would. Does your faith help you to say that?
It probably does. I mean, I think there's lots of reasons why I'd like to meet. I mean, some of them aren't necessarily particularly laudable. I mean, I'd like to know what my assailant looks like before she's on the streets. I'd be keen to know. But I think also I would like to have a conversation with her about what happened. I mean, I'm quite often asked if I've forgiven her, and I always feel I don't see how forgiveness can happen without some sort of communication. And I'd like to ask why she did what she did, how she feels about it now, those sorts of questions, and let's see where that gets us to if the opportunity does arise.
You said it was the third letter she'd sent you, and we assume they were all reaching out to you to apologise.
They were in that direction, and as I say, the third one did clearly say she was sorry. Yeah.
Are you pleased that she'd written to you?
Yes, after it happened, after she was sentenced, I said to the police I would like to meet her then, just to find out a bit more about what was going on. She was my constituent. I had met her. She'd come to Parliament with a school class previously, apparently. I mean, I don't recall the occasion, but she had. She'd grown up in my constituency and spent her life there. And I would have liked to have met her then. The police at the time said they didn't think that was a good idea, so I didn't pursue it. But now that the opportunity perhaps has arisen again, I'd welcome that.
We all mourned and mourn the loss of Jo Cox and Sir David Amos. When those murders happened, it must have a particular impact on you and your family. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. As I say, I don't get flashbacks about it. So I don't think those two awful incidents were any worse for me than they were for everybody else. Jo Cox was a terrible loss to Parliament and to her constituents and to her very many friends and admirers. And I vividly remember where I was when I heard what had happened. And to begin with, I just heard that she'd been attacked, and I assumed that she was going to be okay. And then later emerged that she died. David Amos, I actually knew quite well because he grew up in my constituency. He'd always been very supportive of our community, although we don't elect Conservatives in my community. He tried to get himself elected and had failed. He was always very interested, and then he was a very kind person, I think, David Amos, and so he is deeply mourned as well.
I think I'm perhaps the only person who has permission to say this. I think it's difficult for politicians to say it, and I regret the fact that politicians can't say it's not safe for me to do surgeries in this way. You are living evidence of that. Don't you need a police presence or some security? How much? We don't want to lose anyone else.
No. I mean, I think members of Parliament do need to be accessible to their constituents. I think that's a really important part of the job and also a really important part of democracy. I think if we were to disappear behind some barriers, I think that would be a real loss to democracy in Britain. So I'd be very reluctant to go down that road. I'm grateful, actually, that over the last couple of months, police officers have often been at my surgery. And I hope we'll be able to get to a place where we can be safe again doing our jobs. But I certainly wouldn't want to see us stopping doing the jobs in response to what's happened.
I don't know whether to say that's very brave. It's very decent. It's very big, and I don't think I'd have the courage to say it if I was in your position. So I just want to say thank you and admiration to you on that.
Well, you know, I enjoy doing surgeries. I enjoy the conversations I have at surgeries. I feel very unhappy if I had to stop doing that. You know, I think that would be a tragic consequence of what's happened, and I hope we can avoid that consequence.
Stephen Timms, an absolute pleasure to listen to you. Thank you for being so open. Thank you, Stephen Timms.
Thank you for having me.